Welcome to Ransomware Realities, Insider Perspectives, and Proactive Defense Strategies here at Tech Compass. I know we're probably getting some folks just joining, but thank you all for taking the time to get educated and hear some incredible and interesting stories that we're going to be talking about today regarding real ransomware attack experience from our guest speakers. So thank you all for joining. We've got Paul Hamman and Kate Stafford here as some of our guests, as well as Ramin Lemay, CEO and founder of Tech Compass. So I'll do a quick intro of everyone. Just for everyone who doesn't know me, Jesse Metters. I am head of expansion at Tech Compass. Come from a recruiting background and help kind of lead all of the projects, building out our team here. And I'll be the moderator for this afternoon's event. So let's start with a couple intros. First of all, Ramin Lemay, CEO and founder of Tech Compass, comes from over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity leadership, spent 13 years at a large payment processor where he led all of security for many years, then also led a major cloud transformation, over 34 different mergers and acquisitions where he was integrating these companies into the organization, and has taken that corporate enterprise experience and brought it to small, medium, and a little bit larger companies that we service here at Tech Compass. We focus a lot on software companies and technology companies, as well as fintech. We also have Paul Hamman. Paul and I actually have known each other for quite some time. Paul and I used to talk when I was a recruiter at Utica College back in the day. But Paul has over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, worked at a variety of companies, but a lot of enterprise level financial services, was the CISO at a fintech company. And then most recently, within the last year, a little over a year now, started Zeus Technologies, where he provides consulting to his clients and a variety of different services. Paul, I can have you, talk a little bit about that if you'd like, but we'll cover that a little bit later. And then Kate Stafford. Kate, welcome. I've kind of known each other for a couple of years. Kate comes with 25 years of cybersecurity background, and I feel like you've worked in almost every sector: financial services, retail, fintech, telecom, and then most recently we're at the identity fraud prevention software company. And I believe you are about to take on a new role soon. So hopefully we'll have some good ability to hear that announcement in the next month or so. But welcome. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your afternoon. And this is important. We see ransomware is on the rise. These types of attacks, especially with, the most recent with Change Healthcare, I think is the most prevalent public one. But each of you have had your own experiences. So we're going to start with first, just for the audience, we're not sure exactly, what your experience is for those of you who are here. So if you can use the comment section, if you don't know what ransomware, like a real ransomware attack is, feel free to throw a comment on there. Let's see if we've got anybody that would like to talk today. We'll give it a quick second here. And then I think in general, that would be good just to do a quick definition of ransomware and how this attack actually happens. So Ramin, I'm going to ping this over to you. If you can just give a quick definition of ransomware attack and maybe a couple different types of attacks that can happen.
Sure. So, I like to keep the definition very simple, right? So it's a type of malware that locks and encrypts like a victim's data. So whether it's your device, laptop, workstation, or it can also spread on your network and access additional systems. So those are basic definitions. Before we got on, Kate was actually giving me some other examples, which I thought were interesting as well that I hadn't considered. Kate, love to, have you tell us what those are too. Those were ones that you don't think about every day.
Yes, I think recently we've been thinking of ransomware as these very large scale enterprise attacks that are hitting the news. But for years, there has been consumer variants as well, targeting home PCs, where you may have gone to a sketchy website and suddenly you've got a lock screen on your computer looking for a couple $100 to unlock it. So this falls under the umbrella of ransomware as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ramin. Thank you, Kate. So let's dive into the topic. First of all, we want to hear your experiences. So I'm going to start. We'll start with Kate. Sorry, ladies first. And Kate, the question is, can you briefly describe your experience with a ransomware attack, and what was the initial moment of realization like?
Yeah. So our initial moment of realization was when the SOC had reported to us in the morning that they saw some traffic overnight flare up on our XDR alerts, didn't know which action to take, and decided to allow it to continue. And we took a look at the PC that was the source of the alerts, and it was doing a lot of things that really were abnormal and anomalous for that host. And that right away gave us an indication that something wasn't right, and started looking at what that host was speaking with, connecting with, and seeing very similar anomalous behavior on everything it was touching. So it became apparent very quickly something wasn't right.
Well, Paul, same question to you.
So within my scenario, it was a lot easier because the user was actually didn't hit infrastructure; it actually hit a user endpoint, and this particular user was actually working remotely over the weekend and unconnected from their VPN. So we were actually notified via phone call or email from the person who had their machine impacted about what had happened, that they noticed their machine acting funny, and that they went to open up a file to work on a PowerPoint presentation, and that's when they received their message stating that the Bitcoin with the instructions and all of that information. So not a lot of alarms and alerts going off on our side because of the isolation that was in place when it actually occurred is the biggest probably saving grace for the organization when this happened. So, and then the user brought it in the next day. I think it was Monday, the following day over the weekend, and we began our investigation to remediate and investigate it further to see what was going on there.
Excellent. And just for those of us who are just joining, one of the things that I wanted to also make sure that I announced, I did announce it on LinkedIn, but at the end of this webinar, so if you stick around to the end, we have a promo code that we're going to give away, a 20% discount off of a ransomware assessment from Tech Compass. And then for one lucky viewer who is live today, we're going to give away a free ransomware assessment valued at $5,000. And there are some couple limitations to that. Obviously, if you're at a really large enterprise company, we might have to talk about that, but we'll cover some of those details with the winner at the end. Okay, so let's get into some another question here for all of you guys. So immediate response and challenges. What was the first steps that you took after discovering a ransomware attack, and what were the biggest challenges in the initial response? Kate, we'll start with you again.
I think the first steps we were taking was really focused on containment. At this point, it wasn't anything other than very suspicious activity, and acting very quickly to try to make sure that's all it remained. I think that what some of the challenges were was the threat actor was changing their behavior in real time. They knew that a security team was chasing them and were changing their tactics and shaking things up. So once we closed one door, they had already opened up another window. So it was very much a game of cat and mouse for a while.
Paul, over to you as far as the question. I know your attack was a little bit different, but definitely your perspective on kind of the process.
Yeah, well, once the user brought the machine in, we don't connect that to the internal network. We have that in a completely isolated type scenario. And what we were able to do is once we did a little bit of research, we found out that the ransomware and it appeared to be drive-by ransomware that was probably launched onto the end user's computer. So what we found is that it was an old piece of ransomware that the threat actors had actually, I think they had probably 2 versions more out released because they patched their stuff too. And
Isn't that nice
we
of
were exactly. I'm glad that they, do their own software support as well. So we were able to actually take the files on the end user's machine and actually revert them to a previous version, which may have lost them a little bit of versioning type data, but we were able to recover the bulk of the data that way, which then we copied to another machine and then scanned with updated signatures along with the new signature that we just grabbed from this one, because it didn't appear to be polymorphic either and dropped more ransomware along the machine either, from what we could tell, and then essentially wipe the machine, right? And then, completely rebuild the machine and then restore the user's files from there. So ours was, lucky, knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't
The
talk
happy
about
ending there.
more luckier, ransomware experience than that, I think. So I feel pretty lucky with how we got off with that one. And that I was surprised when I actually did the research and I was like, oh, look, this is a broken piece of ransomware. We may be able to just revert this back, rather than, I think it was like $300 or something that they wanted for the one endpoint. Probably closer to like a home version type of ransomware that she had gotten on her machine. So lucky.
Yeah, man. Well, let's talk about, so I think a lot of people think about ransomware. They think of, let's talk about the Change Healthcare where they paid the ransom, which incentivizes these groups to continue. But has either of you had a scenario, whether that be, working with a client in the past or at a former company? And obviously we're going to be very dates. We're not going to cover any kind of dates or companies or industries so that the information stays confidential here. Anyone had to pay a ransom, or had a company that had to pay a ransom? And if so, what was the thought process there of why?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I've been involved with a company that went through a ransomware attack, and the determination was the cost of the ransom was less than the potential impact to the business for continued downtime and the leakage of intellectual property. They were advised by their counsel and by their insurance carrier that payment was a good bet in this case, because the actor group was known to be someone who backed off once they were paid. So that all factored into the decisioning of do we continue to fight this, or is it time to cut bait and make it go away?
That's interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting you can look at the reputation of the ransomware attacker and see like their behavior in past experience, and then make that determination kind of based off some of those other factors. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's interesting. Well, so, after we get through this decision making of do you pay or not, I think the next thing is we look at the collaboration aspect of this, right? Which I think will help educate users on the preparation in case they do get a ransomware attack, right? And are you prepared? Have you really thought through this scenario if it does happen? What was that kind of collaboration with external entities communication look like? Like, did you communicate with law enforcement, with a cybersecurity firm? I think, Kate, when we were talking earlier, you had a pretty good example here, and love for you to share, a little bit of that interaction that you had, and, some of the value that you gained from that.
Yeah. So it's become common practice for a lot of larger enterprises in past several years to have a retainer with a DFIR or some sort of incident response partner. Depending on what your security insurance carrier or your policy is like, they may even negotiate a rate for you. It may even be covered as part of your policy, but these are good partnerships to have in place prior to when you have an event. If you are having an event and you are currently being impacted, this isn't the type of time that you want to be evaluating vendors, working through an MSA with your legal team, negotiating rates. So having a retainer in place is very, very, very valuable. Because some of these firms, this is all they do. This is mitigating and containing attacks and negotiating ransoms if necessary. having that in place, but then more importantly, having a threshold of what would it take you to engage that retainer? What would it take you to engage that partner? You don't want to leave it up to feel or chance. Have very tangible thresholds that if we start having this level of impact or this duration of impact at this point, it's time to bring in the cavalry.
That's great advice. Ramin, I wanted to ping this over to you as well, because I know you've had some breach experience, not specific to ransomware, but I think, having maybe some other thoughts on, having to go through that. What were the values that you saw in like already having some plans in place, communication with the right vendors in place? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of piggybacking off of what Kate said, right? So it's a lot of preparation already laid out, right? So then you're just executing your plan, and everyone knows their roles. There's SLAs, there's procedures that are already predefined for you to kind of coordinate and execute. And I've had that kind of role in my previous corporate background, where I was in charge of essentially being like an incident commander for 5 years, right? So you're always on call, you're always ready to engage who you need to in terms of like different parts of the organization, from IT to the application teams. And then you practice a lot as well. And, luckily on the corporate side, they're always busy. So you're not doing a whole lot of tabletop exercises. You have a lot more, continuous activity that's keeping you busy, right? Users are always going to be clicking on some kind of email, or as they just browse the internet. It just happens. It's part of the nature. So then, you target those controls and you focus on those.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I want to talk about lessons learned, and once you've gone through this, like what are some of the things that you learned from it, the changes that were implemented? Paul, I wanted to start with you on this one, because I know you mentioned one of the things that with your specific experience was cybersecurity awareness training was really key here. Can you walk us through that a little bit and how that was helpful in your attack scenario?
Well, due to the, extensive, this organization actually had quite extensive cybersecurity awareness training, across all kinds of different levels of threats, like ransomware, which ransomware was a threat that they discussed directly, as well as social engineering and those types of things. But that was what was key. And the user feeling comfortable enough that they weren't going to get in trouble just because their machine got infected, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen where people get worried about having to report that sometimes too. And I've come across scenarios like that where somebody finally gets frustrated when they have a piece of malware on their machine and they're like, I give up, I can't get it off. And then they finally come to you and it's like, hey, why didn't you just reach out? Don't spend a couple of hours, reach out to the experts that are in your company. And if necessary, outside the company that's been, set up with a retainer to address it quickly, because time is of the essence when you deal with a threat like this. So, that security awareness training was the first line of defense for us. And luckily in this particular scenario, it held up for us because she noticed something weird and she felt comfortable enough to report it. And we were able to, contain it and isolate it so that it didn't, attack and spread to the rest of the company.
Wow. Yeah, super helpful. Kate, your perspective, what were some of the key lessons learned, I guess, right? And the things that you implemented after going through this, if it was multiple attacks in your career, what were some of the key things now that you'd love to share, to those that are security leaders or IT leaders that, want to be more aware of this?
Yeah, I think I will echo what Paul said about security awareness. These attacks, these events almost always have some sort of human element involved in them. It's not malicious. It's often a lack of understanding. But the one thing that I have learned through going through these is having a very, very clear roles and responsibilities and plan of action documented. You can go through all of the tabletop exercises in the world when everything is fine, but when things like this happen, as security professionals, we've seen this. We know how to navigate it, but you're going to be working with someone in your company who's maybe never experienced something of this magnitude. And emotions start to take over. People get frightened. People get scared. Is there going to be a job here for me in the future? Is there even going to be a company in the future? So being able to take that incident commander role and training people within the security organization to be the calm, level-headed presence was a big takeaway for me and some of the events I've been through. Metaphor I like to use is you don't want to be on a plane where the pilot is panicking.
That's so true. Yeah, or a cop that has to pull a gun and didn't practice at all. Right.
Right.
That's another real problem. Yeah, no, I think thinking of it in that way, right? There's a muscle memory. There's a plan of attack. Who's the commander? Who do we call first, right? Like the order of event, and really walking through that and ensuring all the stakeholders are involved. How hard have you, like, maybe walk through a little bit of that? Like now you go through these events and you're like, okay, I know what we need to do. You step into an organization, there's resistance to, doing these tabletops, and spending time to build out a plan. What are some of the things that you've seen have been helpful to get the other stakeholders in the company on board with this?
Right. I've definitely taken the approach of it being a business problem. Right. A lot of times when we put together plans, we put together tabletops, they're very technical in nature, very good for a CERT team. But having the lens coming in from maybe your chief marketing officer, what are you going to put out towards your customers? What's your public statement?
Yeah.
If people start inquiring as they're hearing rumors, what are we going to tell people? And these aren't decisions that should be being driven from a security operations center. Right? These are decisions that need to be made by people with different lenses within the business. And you can make similar examples of any single leader in your business who would be impacted. But really driving that collaboration and partnership at that level to have participation in the plan, and then ultimately annual tabletops or whatever cadence you decide on is absolutely mandatory.
Yeah. Ramin, any thoughts there? And just, especially when we do these like ransomware assessments with companies, what are some of the things that you notice in the conversations we're having with the different stakeholders where you kind of help educate, but communicate it in a way that they're going to understand it, like Kate just said?
Yeah, I love what Kate said too. And, I did get an interesting piece of information from a security awareness vendor that I think also just shocked me, right? So one of the security awareness training platform vendors, KnowBe4, we partner with them as part of our security awareness type of services that we offer. And they're our sales guy had mentioned that essentially 10% of the market is about all that have security awareness training today. That means 90% of companies out there don't have a program or don't have a vendor, at least in that space. So that was just shocking to me to hear that that's it. That's the current coverage that a vendor in this space is seeing being currently covered, and the opportunity for them is 90%. So just to give that information that was shocking to me to learn that. But it, as I mentioned, it piggybacks off of what Kate mentioned, because it's about being prepared, and a lot of times being prepared, I tie back to kind of having a risk type of mindset as a company, right? As the leadership team of that company. I've seen that sometimes come in the form of a technologist. Sometimes they have security staff. Sometimes they have security programs. Sometimes they don't. But it's seeing how that organization operates and how they make decisions. I've seen companies that don't make risk-minded decisions that later down the road, they're dealing with a lot of challenges where they don't collaborate well. There's a lot of blaming. There's tech debt because they don't write down, what exceptions that they're making and go back and, address them. So you see different symptoms over time of, the impact there. And a lot of times, they take shortcuts, right? So, not paying for security awareness training, not getting assessed to know where your risks are, not doing testing of your controls to see how effective they are, right? These are not thought about until you go through an incident, unfortunately. Learn that that's really serious. You need to really put in the effort there, and compliance doesn't equal security, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to educate and help companies be more prepared. And that's a better place to be if you're trying to sleep well at night.
Yeah. Paul, you've now been in the consulting world for the last year. What are some of the thoughts you want to add to what's already been said, if anything?
So, like what Kate and Ramin was stating, one of the first things I did when I became a CISO at Cantaloupe was we started to update the crisis communication plan, which, like Kate was stating, that was the document that we used for the marketing team, the legal team, the executives, to know how we were going to report out to the public if something was to happen that would impact not only our business, but their businesses as well. And then we would use that as that top level piece of communication, which then you have your playbooks that you run underneath that your team's using to try and contain and remediate and keep things online. When I usually try and start taking this, especially with some of the business stakeholders that sometimes want to just say, hey, this is cyber, it's not my problem, which is trying to show them the impact to what they do for the company, and then try and drive some type of quantification, right? So I can put a dollar sign in front of it. If I can put a dollar sign in front of the impact that I'm going to show that business stakeholder, usually their eyes are going to look at that dollar sign and read that. Or a percentage, right? If you can't get a dollar sign, get a percentage. Usually those types of things communicate better when you try and show that quantification, or what type of risk is actually there and present, and what you're trying to address for them.
Paul, it's like almost speaking their language, right? So if you're going to talk to a CFO, if you're not talking numbers to a CFO and you're in charge of security or technology or compliance, then you're not communicating to his language.
Right. The marketing person, I talk about brand and reputation, right? And if it's a publicly traded company, how's that going to impact our stock, right? Which that's definitely CEO, CFO, marketing, that's all of them together. If you're publicly traded, then they're all getting involved. But if you're not, usually, that's the impact. It's going to impact those people significantly. And not everybody can recover, as well as some of these other companies have, especially from a stock standpoint, right? You've seen different weird fluctuations, depending on the organization and how they responded and how that impacted the value of the company or the stock price after an event has occurred as well. So all those things should be taken into account, and trying to, deliver that type of data, right? Information to to those executives so that they can make a more data informed decision on approach when the SLAs kick in, when we contact, if we need to contact, legal or the law enforcement or FBI and those types of things as well. And I highly recommend making sure, like Kate was saying too, of not just having external vendors, make sure you contact the FBI in the local area as well too, and reach out to, InfraGard has memberships all over the country, and those folks are super nice. Set up the conversation and communication channels. So if something does happen and you need them, it's not the first time that you're talking to them or first time meeting them as well.
Yeah, great points. Great points, Paul, Kate, Ramin. Thank you so much. I wanted to pause for a minute because we're about 30 minutes in. We'll be wrapping up here in a little bit. But if anybody who is watching live has any questions, feel free to put those in the comment section, and we'll make sure that we address those questions towards the end of the presentation. Well, let's pivot a little bit. And one of the things Ramin and I enjoy with our podcast, Securing the Future, is really kind of talking about the future of security. With ransomware attacks, I'd love to get your perspective, and this could come from either all three of you. I'd love to hear your perspective on what do you think the future is going to look like of ransomware as things evolve? What are the emerging threats that organizations should be aware of? Where do you see this going? So we'll start with Kate, if you want to share any thoughts that you have on that.
Yeah, I think what concerns me the most with the trend that ransomware is going in is the velocity and the speeds. 5 years ago, these used to have ransomware used to have a dwell time of weeks, if not months. Attacker would gain access to your environment, would spend a lot of time doing recon, figuring out how to move laterally, infecting as much as possible, having everything in a row before any ransom was launched. That has now been reduced down to days, if not hours. So it is the trend and the concern is, will our controls keep up? Will our staffing keep up? You have to have eyes on glass almost 24/7 right now at the current velocity that ransomware is coming into environments. So yeah, that is definitely where I see it going, is the continued speed and impact.
What is driving that change in speed? What are some of the factors?
I think some of these groups, the threat actor groups, are becoming larger and much better funded. They've had success. This is what works for them. This is not one random person in a hoodie doing this to you. These are very well established enterprises that are operating with their own P&L and SLA. So you are competing against a very well-run business that probably has more resources than you do.
Sometimes more money too.
Yeah. Paul, your thoughts on that? Anything that you want to piggyback on Kate?
So yeah, it's getting worse, right? And it's coming faster, very much like Kate was saying. I guess, I'm somewhat optimistic. There's some really cool tools that vendors have come out with. I'm not going to pitch any particular vendor capability, but I've got a couple in my pocket that I keep for those that want to invest directly into those type of capabilities. They sometimes come with some trust trade-offs, but I mean, these solutions downright will stop everything that I've seen so far, even zero-day ransomware, and recover your stuff for you, like within minutes as well. So there are solutions and capabilities out there if organizations are willing to invest in them. The ones that I've seen really weren't that expensive. I mean, it was down to like the price of antivirus licensing for your endpoint. So, seriously, I mean, if you think you're a high value target for, ransomware, because we even have nation states using it now too, to fund their programs, not just for money or damage, but to fund programs, due to the poor economy, they've got programs that they want to fund too. So I'm optimistic from that standpoint, because I think the vendors, there's a lot of cool vendor stuff going on out there. Plus with the transition from a lot of people moving out of their data centers and moving into cloud, the cloud presents a lot of opportunities to be able to not only, recover from something like this by using very, high velocity, well thought out backup strategies and plans, but also being able to isolate and contain environments very quickly too, because of the way that if you're properly architected and deployed into a cloud environment, you should have the proper segmentation in place that will enable you to be able, if something was to kick off, you could at least start to isolate environments very quickly, within minutes. If you're, if you want to go for it, you can put in automation. They'll do that for you too. But people are a little bit still scared of that automation. But hopefully with AI coming in, we can make better decisions on SOAR and things like that and start to respond more quickly. Because one of the best feelings is when you get to kick guys out and you don't have to pay the ransom. So
absolutely. Yeah. Now I was actually going to ask you, what are you seeing with the implementation of, generative AI and kind of where we are with artificial intelligence and machine learning? How is that going to affect some of the tooling that you're seeing?
It's massive. I mean, everybody's using, everybody that I see is using AI, putting AI in. I built my own GPT the other day. I'm still playing with it and learning it, but I think it's going to be massive. People are building some really cool tools. Obviously, yeah, we've got problems. That's technology for you, right? That's where us as technology professionals and cybersecurity professionals, we help overcome those issues, right? So that we can move our industry forward. And I think we're going to be able to do that and leverage the AI in a positive manner. There's just going to be bumps in the road as we go along, and we'll figure it out as we go. And I think we have the ability to do it. It's just going to take some work.
Kate, any other thoughts there with regard to AI and how that's going to affect the future?
Yeah, I think echoing Paul's sentiment there that it's going to help reduce some of the fatigue that we have through a lot of our tooling today. I think that we are absolutely drowning in alerts, drowning in information, looking for a needle in a haystack. And I think AI is really going to help with a lot of the SOAR opportunities. I think one thing to keep an eye on is we won't be the only ones using AI, though. What kind of machine learning models will be utilized in tactics by our adversaries? How are we going to protect against that as well? So I think it's going to develop for both of us over the next couple of years.
Same cat and mouse game, just a different. We're just using a different ball now. So the ball's AI. So here we go. Just like when the cloud started, right? You can't secure the cloud. The cloud will never be secure. Look at where we are today.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Paul. It seems that way in cyber attacks in general, right? Like a lot of the types of attacks are similar. It's just different technology that's happening, but the way and the methods and a lot of that has just been similar for the last 15, 20 years, right?
Exactly. Some of this stuff's old dusted off ransomware that somebody's updated and refactored and brought it back to life, right? And it's not in a signature database anymore because it's been changed. And you can't trust signatures anymore because of the polymorphic and all that good stuff. So you got to look at the behavioral type stuff. And that requires more intelligent tooling, large language models, and those types of things. One thing I do get worried about is people training to look for behavioral type analysis, and then they're doing it on dirty networks already. And I tried to tell some people, I'm like, hey, if you train the dirty stuff in, it's just going to look like normal traffic then. So, people need to be careful when they train the models too, that, make sure you're training in pristine environments on the communication. Otherwise, if you build in the bad traffic by using a production network that may be already compromised, you're not doing yourself any good there, because you're going to end up hiding the bad traffic potentially, not picking it up like you wanted to.
Yeah, makes sense. One question I wanted to pose to all of you, and especially if you've been working with smaller companies, if you're a founder or CEO of a tech company, and you're building something out today, what are some of the things that we can help as cybersecurity community educate the business leaders with regard to protection against these types of attacks, and in general, just thinking better about implementing security, baking it in early on? I know that's a whole different topic, but I think it's applicable here when we talk about the learns and the implementation of best practices for companies, especially companies that are young and growing, moving quickly, leveraging cloud native environments, let's say. What are some tips that you would want to share to protect these companies from ever having a ransomware attack? We can start with Kate, actually, if you'd like. I know you worked with some startups as well.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, getting it baked in early. Security by design, shift left, all of that nomenclature. When you are in the early days of a startup, it is not top of mind. It is, how can I innovate? How can I respond? How can I get a minimally viable product out to market?
Yeah.
And it is a slippery slope to that becoming technical debt, where you are putting bolt-on solutions on after the fact that will never ever be as good as if you had involved a security mindset at the beginning of the process. So easier said than done, right? It's when you talk about startups, you don't have a security professional in your first 10 hires. You probably don't have it in your first 100 hires. So it is something that we just need to continue with the education out to the tech community of baking security into your SDLC. So it does not become some type of technical debt that has to be solved for later.
Yeah.
And
Paul, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm a huge fan of the whole buzzword factory around shift left and secure by design. So I can tell you, I don't have hard data and metrics on this, but by doing this multiple times now, the first adventure being in the public cloud for the federal government, and I shifted everything as far left as I possibly could. And it wasn't because I knew what I was doing. It was because I did what I knew, and I fixed all those problems first. And then I brought my applications in later. We had, at the end of 2 years, we had no criticals, no highs, and no medium findings. We only had lows left in the environments.
Wow.
And that was across 3 different platforms. The other thing is, I can honestly tell you, by doing that and then going to financial services and building out cloud environments there, as well as coming in where cloud environments were already built out, and then we had to refactor and then bolt on security afterwards. If you start to bring in cybersecurity professional, even at a fractional basis at the beginning, if you're a startup, just some basic architectural design aspects can help save your company anywhere from 2x to 5x, right? Wow. The other thing I do know too is that if you are a startup and you're looking at acquisition later on down the road, during your M&A process, they are probably going to do a cybersecurity due diligence process on your organization. Imagine how much value you could potentially add onto your organization if you weren't carrying around a ton of security technical debt that would potentially put not only your company, but your customers at risk too, because I've seen some of those. And I'm like, wow, you guys have let this go for this long. Why don't, and then that becomes a negotiation factor, right? The acquiring company then negotiated down the purchasing price because, there was $5 million worth of just security technical debt. We're not talking about tech debt, security tech debt, right? Wow. So don't start off with that. Save yourself and your company 2x to 5x in cost by doing it first. Secure by design and shift left, and do it all up front. You'll be amazed when you get to the end of it how much time, money, and effort you've saved. It'll be amazing.
Ramin, any thoughts that you want to add there as well?
Well, obviously I'm biased, so I'm going to say, find a good security partner. But, in reality, if you are if you are a startup, that's not your expertise.
Nope.
That's why there are partners out there, companies like, for example, Tech Compass, that can partner with you in different engagement models to help you with where you are, right? Where you can't afford a full-time CISO, right? A full-time CISO could be a very expensive cost, right? From early on. So that's where, a partnership where you're paying fractions of that. Paul brought it up, right? There's fractional type CISOs, available to you as resources that you can engage per initiative. Hey, here's our application design. Come review it and give us security feedback, right? So those are examples of engagements where partners can help you meet what you need in terms of your business outcomes. Other than that, no, I think these guys did an awesome job covering it, right? It's hard to follow some of the comments from Kate and Paul. These guys are well into their careers and know what they're doing, and I appreciate what you guys do. You guys are undervalued professionals day to day, but long term you're appreciated as companies don't have security incidents that end up in the news, right? So that's the hardship of doing security roles, and the struggle doesn't ever end. It's just tomorrow. How are we going to maintain it tomorrow?
Yeah, no, it's well said. Well, I think we're going to near the end of our presentation. So a couple things that we want to go over next as we wrap up. First of all, absolutely agree. Paul, Kate, you guys have been amazing. And just the wealth of knowledge that you both bring to be able to share and I think continue to evangelize how important security is, how important it is to just get someone in there to give you some advice. You're going to save yourself so much heartache, millions of dollars potentially. And like you said, Paul, there's a huge business value in a company engaging with a security leader early to present themselves as a trusted partner whether that be, like you said, an acquisition. A lot of times when, in my experience, working on searches to find a head of security, a lot of times, Kate, you're absolutely right. We would come in with a company that was about 100 employees or more. And, they were at that point where they could afford a full-time security leader. But many times they didn't have anybody guiding them in the beginning stages. So this security leader would come into a mess a lot of times, or there were technology decisions that were made that could have been easily avoided with the right help of a security leader. And so we want to talk about our ransomware assessment. Ramin, if you can briefly talk about what does a ransomware assessment look like when us at Tech Compass, when we come into your company, what does that engagement kind of look like? Very high level, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, we think about it very practically, right? So, what are the important things that you would want to know, right? So, I think about our customers or our, the leadership of our customers, what do they want, right? They want to know simple questions. They want to ask questions like, am I ransomware ready, right? So meaning if ransomware was to enter my environment today, like what's the likelihood of, that's going to impact my business, and what does that impact look like? So, if we can help answer those type of questions with our assessment, where we can look at their controls, we can look at their hygiene, we can look at, even their configurations. If we get, into the weeds, we'll look at, if you have backups, are they immutable backups? What's the coverage? When was the last time you performed backups, right? So once you get under the covers, you can then, put together the whole picture of where this company or this organization is in terms of their controls, their process, how susceptible are their users to social engineering attacks? Do they have the right endpoint protection, right? The goal is to answer those questions. And if the answer is you're not prepared, right? And Kate and Paul have done an awesome job talking about kind of what that preparation looks like. What are all the things you want to have in place before, the event happens? That's what we want to produce as an outcome of an assessment, right? So that you see that and you see it prioritized. These are actionable items where you can take forward with your team and be able to prepare yourself and your organization for such a scenario, and even go through an exercise of testing your controls. So those are, the type of outcomes and the type of questions we try to answer with the assessments. And every assessment is different, right? Every organization is different. Every organization has different ways that their business operates, and ransomware can impact that, right? Like the healthcare examples are where we're seeing, it's impacting people's ability to get prescriptions, right? So that's impacting their health, right? So that organization should think about ransomware preparation in a different way than, maybe a fintech company that might be down for a period of time and not be able to process payments, right? And those are part of the threat modeling too, right? Once you do an assessment, you get a better sense of where could it even come into your environment. So I'll kind of leave it at that, Jesse. I think that captures the meat of it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ramin. So I'm not sure if our comments are working or not, or we just don't have a lot of comments happening here. So we're probably going to look at the users that attended, and we'll make an offer at the end as far as the free ransomware assessment that we're going to offer to a lucky company that is interested. And then for anyone who is interested in having a conversation with us, our promo code is ransom22. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the comments section here, ransom22. So if you mention that, we will give you 20% off the ransomware assessment. And we'd be happy to have a free consultation to really understand your needs, and then kind of start going through that process with you. Paul, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to educate our audience and to share your stories. I learned a lot, Ramin and I both, and we just really appreciate your time and appreciate what you guys are doing. You are literally the guardians of companies, and it's a big deal. I've just become passionate about this industry and what you guys do. You're superheroes. You really are. You make a big difference. And I know you don't get that a lot. Sometimes it's like you don't really get to see the results of what you do tangibly, but we thank you for the service and the work that you're doing in this field. It means a lot. So thank you both.
No problem, Jesse, Ramin. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and talk about ransomware And Kate, thank you as well. It was a pleasure meeting you, and certainly enjoyed the conversation with you today, and look forward to talk to you some more about some other scenarios that you've been through as well. Always like trading.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And Jesse and Ramin, thank you so much for putting this together.
Absolutely. No, we really enjoyed it, and you guys did fantastic. So thank you all for those who watched, and for those who are potentially going to watch this recorded version. We hope this has been helpful for you and educational. And to everyone, have a great afternoon.
Thanks.